Subs, active players, a general metric of the overall health of an MMORPG. Nowadays, companies do not disclose sub counts. It's just way too variable. Instead, they advertise the total number of players that ever played the game. Sort of like how McDonald's would count every single customer they ever served since they opened. Which is why you get numbers like 116 million people played World of Warcraft and 30 million people played Final Fantasy XIV. These numbers are not a representation to the numbers of players playing right now. But luckily there are dedicated people out there who will scrape the lodestone and battle.net in order to paint a more accurate picture. What does that mean? Well, the lodestone and battle.net are a repository of sorts that players can use to look up other players. It's Facebook for MMOs. You can see the players' equipment, levels, achievements, minions/pets, and mounts. And these scrapers can take that information to estimate current active players. For example, pre-ordering expansions usually will give the player a unique minion and/or mount as a reward, and the scraper can look at that to get a number for pre-orders. By the way, I am using active players and subs interchangeably here, because these are sub-based games. If you are an active player, you paid a sub when the data was gathered. Lucky Boncho is a player that scrapes the lodestone to approximate how many players there are actively playing Final Fantasy XIV. In his latest scrape, the numbers that came out showed some pretty crazy growth from the last time that the numbers were released. In fact, every single metric has had a significant increase. So, what do these numbers show? Well, the number of active players is about 1.62 million, which was an increase of 420,000 from the previous survey in July. That is a growth of about 25.92%. That is insane. Keep in mind that this number does not reflect players that are level 60 or below. I have friends and family that play Final Fantasy XIV that are in the below 60 demographic who have bought Endwalker and are currently subbed. It just makes you wonder how many other players are in this demographic where they don't count for the total. A lot of new players have come to the game lately. Who knows how many weren't counted? All that is to say, these numbers are estimates. The reason Lucky doesn't want to count characters that are 60 and below is because they could be on the free trial, and that does not count for players that are subbed. Another interesting metric is that 882,314 players have completed MSQ patch 5.3. This data was gathered by looking at the achievements. When you look at the number of players who pre-ordered Endwalker, that number is 864,568. That means that basically every player that has gotten deep into the story of Shadowlands has pre-ordered Endwalker. It's almost a 1-for-1 ratio. The previous survey showed that there was 420,000 pre-orders, and now it's at 864,568, doubling the pre-orders since the last survey. All I can say to that is, good game. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the number of new characters, which is at 560,000, an increase of 350,000 from the last survey. A new character, as defined by Lucky Boncho, is a character that was not in the previous survey. This is a 166% increase in new characters. So, as you can see, the growth is pretty staggering, and I don't think that's really all that surprising. A few months ago, there was such an influx of new players looking to buy the game that Square Enix actually sold out of digital keys. Servers were becoming so full of players that people couldn't log on, and the developers had to do some server magic so that people could actually play the game. Even now, during a content drought before Endwalker, I am still getting login queues. So, what about World of Warcraft then? Well, the only current data I was able to find for WoW was from a website that did not say how they obtained that data. The site I am talking about is MMOPopulation.com. I have the link in the description if you want to check them out. So, according to MMOPopulation.com, WoW is sitting at 1.1 million active players. If that is remotely true, then it is significantly less than what Final Fantasy XIV is at. Hey all, a bit of a post-edit note, I am apparently blind. I found the page that details how MMO Population gets its data, and they flat out say it was never meant to be accurate for subscribers, and is more of a tracker for the popularity based on Reddit. Okay, fair enough. Now, back to the video. A source that I do trust is Bellular Warcraft, and he has data from 3 months ago gathered from a website called WoWranks.io. That website detailed exactly how they got their data. The problem here is that WoWranks.io is not currently working due to some changes in the API. So, whatever numbers Bellular came up with in August have probably changed by today. I mean, just look at the crazy changes in Final Fantasy XIV over the course of a few months. I'd imagine WoW probably had changes as well, especially considering all the crazy stuff going on at Blizzard at the moment. Anyways, just for fun, we will use Bellular's number from 3 months ago, just to make some comparisons. Just keep in mind, it was 3 months ago, and these numbers are not going to be accurate. The reason I want to use this number is to hone in on a very special point about this data for Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft. So, Bellular estimated that there were 2.6 million players 3 months ago. However, there is something that has to be considered, and that is how many alts players have in World of Warcraft. When you take that into consideration, that number becomes significantly less. Personally, even as a player who didn't enjoy playing alts in World of Warcraft, I still had 4 level 60 characters. That means I was accountable for at least 4 characters being counted in that total number. I also knew players who had one of every single class that would be counted in the data. One player being counted 12 times. And it's not uncommon for even casual players to have multiple alts. This isn't just a hardcore thing. So, taking that into account for World of Warcraft, Bellular came up with 2 scenarios. Best case, World of Warcraft might be at around 1.6 million, and worst case, maybe below 1 million. This was 3 months ago. I can't even imagine what the numbers would look like now. His video goes into much more detail about these numbers, and I have it linked in the description below. Now, this isn't to say that players of Final Fantasy XIV don't have alts. The difference is that alts are not going to be nearly as commonplace, since you can have every job on your one character. Also, leveling up through Final Fantasy XIV is nowhere near as simple as it is in WoW. So, what does this all mean? Well, it looks like Final Fantasy XIV may very well have caught up or even surpassed WoW with its current active player base. WoW has been showing a downward slope when it comes to its active player base for a while now. Final Fantasy XIV has been showing a staggering increase in the past few months. So that conclusion, it seems reasonable, don't you think? Now, don't feel too bad for World of Warcraft. Even when their active player base is in decline, they still make money hand over fist from their in-game store. With that being said, we will never know definitively. MMOs do not release this data publicly. It's a best estimated guess from the data that we can gather. But what do you think? Did Final Fantasy XIV overtake WoW in active players? Well, let me know in the comments below. At the very least, it seems that they are catching up. As Urian Jer has said,
"We may accept this fate or defy it, but we cannot deny it."
As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. Take care and have a fantastic day.